There are words that sound harmless, but once they leave a man's mouth, they quietly destroy his value in the eyes of a woman, not because women are cruel, not because they're playing games, but because your words reveal your mindset, and your mindset reveals your worth. And high-value men, there are 7 things they never say. Not because they're holding back, but because they've outgrown the need. Let's begin. Please give me another chance. A man who begs has already surrendered his power, not because he made a mistake. Mistakes can be noble. But because he made the woman his judge. High-value men take full ownership, but they walk away when their self-respect is no longer honored. They don't chase. They realign. What do you want me to be? She doesn't want a mirror. She wants a man who reflects strength, direction, and certainty. If you ask who you should be for her, you're not being you. And if you're not being you, who exactly is she falling for? High-value men know who they are. And they never give that away. Why are you acting like this? This question sounds innocent, but it exposes emotional instability. It shows a lack of control, a need to fix, and an ego that's bruised. A strong man doesn't react. He observes, he decides, and he walks when necessary. He never gets pulled into drama because peace is his baseline. Am I enough for you? The moment you ask this, you aren't. Not because you lack value, but because you're unsure of it. And confidence isn't something you ask for, and it's something you live. A high-value man is enough for himself. Whether she stays or leaves doesn't change that truth. I need you. Dependency is not attraction. A man can love a woman deeply, but needing her, that's not love. That's lack. When you make her the source of your worth, she'll sense the imbalance. High-value men build a life she wants to be part of, not a void she's pressured to fill. Love has boundaries. Respect has limits. When you abandon them to keep her, you've already lost her. A man who sacrifices his principles for love loses both. The highest form of love is self-respect, because from it all other love flows. Tell me how to make you happy. It sounds noble, but it's misguided. She doesn't want a servant. She wants a leader. Happiness isn't a task list you follow. It's the energy you carry. Lead with purpose. Move with strength, and let her happiness align with the life you're already building. Final words. Here's the truth. A high-value man doesn't perform for approval. He doesn't talk for reassurance. He doesn't explain himself endlessly or beg to be seen. He lives in silence when needed. He leads with presence, and his actions do all the talking. So next time you feel the urge to say one of these 7 things, his pause. Ask yourself, am I speaking from power or from fear? Because the difference between the two is the difference between being just another man in her past or the one she never forgets. High-value men lead through action, not words. This is not a cliche, it's a code they live by. In a world full of noise, of people talking, promising, persuading, and performing, a man of true value understands that what he does speaks louder than anything he could ever say. His choices, his habits, his calm in chaos, his discipline in silence, all of it communicates more powerfully than any speech, declaration, or emotional outburst. Words are cheap. Anyone can say, I'll be there, I care about you, or you can trust me, but to consistently show up when it's inconvenient, to be dependable when no one is watching, to uphold integrity even when it costs you something, that is leadership. And women notice this. She may be intrigued by charm, but she is moved by consistency. It's not the poetry you recite, but the energy you carry. Not the promises you make, but the boundaries you hold. A high-value man knows this deeply. He does not explain his worth, he demonstrates it. You see, words are often used to manipulate perception. Men who lack substance rely on them to shape how they are seen. But a man with internal certainty has no need for excessive explanation. If he respects himself, if he honors his word, if he's building something bigger than approval, then people will feel it without him needing to convince them. His silence is confident. His decisions are firm. His presence alone can shift the energy in a room, not because he demands it, but because he's earned it through years of self-mastery. This kind of leadership isn't loud. It doesn't need applause or permission. It shows up when it's time to act, not when it's time to be seen. When others flinch under pressure, he remains composed. When others need validation, he leans into solitude. He understands that being a man isn't about what you say you'll do, it's about what you've proven you can do again and again, especially when no one's watching. That's where real value is forged, in the unseen hours, in the unnoticed sacrifices, in the self-discipline that creates results, whether the world is clapping or not. A woman may test this. She may say something sharp, withdraw emotionally, or act cold, not to hurt you, but to feel the edges of your stability. If your response is emotional, reactive, filled with words to defend or explain, you lose her trust. But if you stay grounded, if you don't try to control her reaction, if you continue showing up in the same calm, consistent manner, you show her something rare. You show her a man who doesn't flinch, a man who doesn't need to convince her because he knows who he is. That is irresistible. And that's why high-value men don't need to speak much. Their life speaks for them. Their actions are the proof. And in a world of men talking themselves into circles, the one who simply does what he says without fanfare, without begging to be noticed, becomes unforgettable. Validation-seeking language reveals inner weakness. It may not seem like much at first, just a harmless question, a need for reassurance, a subtle plea for approval. But to anyone listening closely, especially a woman tuned into a man's energy, it's a loud signal. It tells her you are not sure of yourself, that you're looking to her to confirm your worth, and that your identity is dependent on her opinion. And when that becomes obvious, attraction starts to fade, not because she's being cruel or judgmental, but because something deep inside her is wired to take strength, direction, and certainty in a man. When a man constantly says things like, "Do you still love me?" or "Was that okay?" or "Are you mad at me?" he's exposing a deeper insecurity. It's not the words themselves, it's the place they're coming from. The moment you look to someone else to tell you that you're good enough, strong enough, worthy enough, you've already given away your power. You've placed your sense of self in someone else's hands. That's not confidence, that's dependence dressed in politeness. A high-value man doesn't need constant feedback to know he's on the right path. He moves with intention. He trusts his decisions, and if he makes a mistake, he adjusts, learns, and continues forward without needing someone to hold his hand through it. Women can feel this difference instantly. One man needs her to validate his every step. The other man is already walking his path, and she can either join him or watch from the sidelines. That contrast is powerful, and most women will choose the man who leads with inner strength over the man who leans on her emotionally just to function. The irony is that the more you seek validation, the less of it you get. When you say things like, "Do you really think I'm good enough?" you're trying to pull approval out of someone who was looking for you to already believe that about yourself. You turn a relationship from something grounded in mutual respect into something fragile, where one person is emotionally babysitting the other. That's not intimacy, that's imbalance, and it creates pressure that drives people away. True confidence is quiet. It doesn't ask, "Do you like me?" It assumes I am enough, whether you do or not. That doesn't mean arrogance or emotional coldness. It means you've spent time with yourself. You've built something within. You've faced your demons and earned your peace. And because of that, you're not looking for someone else to do the emotional lifting for you. You're offering strength, not asking for it. This is what makes a man magnetic. Not perfection, not smooth talk, but stability. A woman feels safe in that presence. She can relax because she knows he won't crumble when things get hard, and that trust builds attraction far beyond physical looks or clever words. It starts the moment you stop speaking from need and start living from truth. Validation isn't something you chase, it's something you outgrow. Over-explaining shows insecurity, not clarity. On the surface, it can look like honesty or good communication, but underneath, it often reveals fear. The fear of being misunderstood, the fear of not being enough, the fear of judgment. A man who constantly explains himself is usually protect something fragile inside him. He's not standing firm in his decisions. He's hoping to convince others, especially a woman, that his choices are acceptable, justified, or worthy. But strength doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't plead for understanding. It moves forward with quiet certainty. A high-value man knows that if his words need too much padding, they lose their power. He says what he means. He makes his choice. And if someone doesn't agree, he doesn't spiral into a monologue trying to make them see it his way. He's not rude. He's not distant. But he respects his own perspective enough to know that it doesn't need endless explanation. Over-explaining isn't about helping someone understand. It's about trying to control how you're perceived. And anytime your behavior is built on perception instead of principle, you've stepped away from your center. Women can sense the difference. A man who explains himself once with confidence is trustworthy. A man who goes on and on, repeating his points, clarifying every detail, and checking if she's okay with what he said, doesn't feel strong. She feels unsure. Doesn't make her feel safer. It makes her feel like she's leading the emotional tone. And once a woman feels like she's leading, especially emotionally, she begins to lose respect for the man in front of her. This doesn't mean you should be cold or dismissive. There's a place for communication, especially in relationships built on mutual understanding. But there's a fine line between sharing your truth and defending it. When a man over-explains, he's often trying to avoid discomfort. He wants to be liked. He wants to smooth things over. He doesn't want to risk disapproval. But leadership, real masculine leadership, requires a tolerance for discomfort. You have to be okay with someone not agreeing with you. You have to be okay with silence, with waiting, with letting things unfold without constantly managing every emotional reaction in the room. People respect what you say when you say it once and mean it. They respect a man who doesn't flinch when questioned, who can clarify if needed but doesn't unravel under pressure. Over-explaining turns a simple no into a negotiation. It turns a clear boundary into a discussion. And boundaries that are up for discussion are no longer boundaries. They're just hopeful suggestions. That's not strength. That's insecurity hiding behind politeness. The truth is, clarity is simple. It's short. It's direct. It doesn't require a paragraph to make sense. And when a man speaks with clarity, he doesn't just gain respect, he commands it. He shows that his words are grounded in thought, backed by values, and unaffected by temporary emotion. That's the kind of man people trust. That's the kind of man a woman follows, not because he demands it, but because his presence proves it. Begging for attention lowers your worth. It sends a signal, whether you realize it or not, that you see yourself as less. When you chase someone's time, affection, or recognition, you're telling them that your value depends on how much they acknowledge you. That energy is repelling, not attracting. No one is drawn to neediness. People may pity it, tolerate it, or manipulate it, but they don't respect it, and they certainly don't desire it. Especially not a woman who is looking for a man to stand firm, to be rooted in his own self-worth, regardless of how much or how little attention he receives. A high-value man never begs for what he can attract. He understands that the more he clings, the more he pushes others away. Attention should never be demanded. It should be earned through presence, not performance. When a man lowers himself, constantly asking things like, "Why haven't you texted back?" or "Do you even care about me?" he exposes a desperation that comes from within. It is not about the woman anymore. It's about a deep need to be seen that he hasn't yet learned to fill on his own. And once that need becomes visible, it shifts the dynamic entirely. What could have been mutual respect becomes imbalance. What could have been admiration becomes pressure. There's nothing wrong with wanting connection. Wanting intimacy is natural, but the moment you start pleading for it, trying to force it, or guilt someone into giving it, you've betrayed your own masculine frame. You've turned your emotional state into someone else's responsibility. And the truth is, no one wants to feel responsible for another person's self-esteem. That's a burden, not a bond. Attention, when it's freely given, is meaningful. It's a reflection of alignment. It shows that two people are moving in rhythm, drawn to each other's energy, curious about each other's minds. But when attention is extracted through emotional pressure, it feels fake. And even if she gives you what you ask for, it won't feel right. You'll still be empty because you didn't earn it through strength. Through submission, high valley. Men move differently. If someone is distant, they don't chase, they observe. If someone pulls back, they don't beg, they assess. And if someone consistently withholds presence, they don't try harder, they walk. Not to prove a point, not to manipulate, but because they respect themselves too much to linger where they are not freely valued. This creates gravity. A man who doesn't beg, who can let go with grace, becomes magnetic. People wonder why he's so calm. They wonder why he doesn't panic. And in that silence, they feel the depth of his self-trust. That is what pulls people in. Not words, not pleading, but poise. Real poise. You don't need to demand attention to be seen. You need to become the kind of man who commands it without asking, not through noise, not through need, but through presence, purpose, and quiet power. That's what separates those who are noticed for a moment from those who are remembered forever. A calm presence communicates more than emotional outbursts. In a world addicted to noise, where people feel the need to speak louder, react quicker, and express every passing emotion, the man who remains composed stands out. His stillness becomes a message. It tells people, especially women, that he is not ruled by impulse. He is not easily shaken. He doesn't let emotion dictate his actions, and because of that, he becomes someone others can trust, someone they can rely on when things get unstable. Calmness isn't the absence of emotion. It's the mastery of it. It means you feel everything, but you choose to respond instead of react. There's power in restraint. When a man doesn't raise his voice, when he doesn't flinch under pressure or lash out in frustration, he projects strength far louder than any words could. A calm presence makes people lean in. It invites curiosity. It creates a kind of gravity, something grounded and solid in a sea of chaos. And for a woman, this is deeply attractive. Not because she wants a robot with no emotion, but because your calmness makes her feel safe. Emotional outbursts create instability, they create uncertainty, but calmness creates space. Space to be herself, space to feel secure, space to trust that you won't collapse when things get intense. A man who loses himself in anger or panic shows he hasn't gets mastered himself. And if you can't hold your own center, how can you expect someone else to feel anchored in your presence? Anyone can react, anyone can explode. That takes no strength, but to hold tension without letting it break you, that's rare. That's leadership. That's what makes people respect you without you having to say a word. It's easy to let emotions drive the moment. It feels justified.
It feels honest.
But raw emotion without control is just noise. A man who constantly vents, argues, or spirals emotionally is not more in touch with himself. And I get that is a hot topic. It's gotten so much pressure. It's gotten so rocky and so grim. News less in control. And control doesn't mean suppression. It means channeling. Your calmness becomes a signal that you've already dealt with the storm inside. And that signal speaks volumes to those around you. A woman doesn't want to walk on your egg storm. She doesn't want to walk on eggshells. She doesn't want to feel like she has to manage your emotional state just to keep the peace. She wants to know that you are steady, that your moods don't swing with the wind, that when life hits hard, you hit back with clarity, not chaos. That's not about being distant, it's about being disciplined. The man who remains calm under pressure isn't numb. He's aware. He feels it all, but instead of letting emotion steer the ship, he lets purpose guide him. He breathes through the fire instead of feeding it, and when he speaks from grounded truth, not temporary pain. That kind of presence is rare. It's powerful, and in silence, it speaks louder than 100 emotional outbursts ever could. Boundaries expressed in silence are stronger than arguments. When a man knows his value, he doesn't need to defend it with long speeches, raised voices, or emotional pleas. His silence, his lack of reaction, his decision to walk away or disengage quietly, these actions speak volumes. They say, I don't allow this in my life, not because he's trying to win, not because he wants control, but because he knows who he is and what he will and will not tolerate. That kind of clarity doesn't need explanation. It doesn't need drama. It just is. When a man argues to prove his boundary, he weakens it. The moment you start defending why your standards matter, you're inviting negotiation. And boundaries are not negotiable. They're personal laws. They're not about changing others. They're about protecting yourself. Arguing about them only drags you into a space where your inner code is put on trial. That's not strength. It's insecurity disguised as communication. But when you hold the line through your actions, when you calmly remove your energy, when you stop showing up, where your respect isn't returned, the message is loud and clear. Women pick up on this energy immediately. If you say, I won't tolerate disrespect, and then continue to entertain someone who disrespects you, your words mean nothing. But if you say nothing and simply distance yourself the moment the line is crossed, you show her that you're not bluffing. That's how trust is built. Not through lectures, but through consistent behavior. A boundary backed by silence and action is unshakable. People often confuse silence with weakness. But the right kind of silence, the kind that comes from internal certainty, is one of the most powerful tools a man can use. It shows that you are not emotionally entangled in the need to be understood, that you don't need to prove your worth, that you are not afraid of loss because you would rather lose someone than lose yourself. That kind of silence doesn't push people away. It draws them closer. It makes them respect you because it shows restraint, control, and dignity. A man who constantly argues over his boundaries is trying to convince, not lead. He wants others to agree before he acts. But leadership doesn't require consensus. It requires courage. And courage often means walking away without saying a word, letting your absence speak, letting your decisions reveal your standards. When a woman feels that, she may push back at first. She may test it, but if you remain consistent, quiet, firm, and unmoved, she will eventually realize that your silence is not emptiness. It's structure, it's strength. You don't owe anyone a detailed explanation for how you choose to live. Your life is your message. Your energy, your time, your presence, all of these are currencies. Spend them where they're valued. When you withdraw those things with quiet finality, it hits harder than any emotional outburst ever could, because in that moment, the other person is left with their own reflection. And they see clearly, sometimes for the first time, that your boundary wasn't just talk. It was the law of your life. And you enforced it without ever raising your voice. So in the end, it's not about being perfect, charming, or always having the right words. It's about embodying a quiet strength that speaks for itself. High-value men don't try to impress women with words they don't live by. They lead with presence, not performance. They don't seek validation. They become the validation. Every time you choose calm over chaos, action over explanation, boundaries over begging, you remind the world and yourself what true value looks like. You don't have to prove anything. Just become the man who doesn't need to. That's why it works, and that's why they remember you.